Welcome back. Our guest this week is Vickie Thompson Sandy, whose organization is bringing refugees to resettle in Michigan. Our lead story, the governor's budget is out and what's in it for you. On the OTR panel, Zachary Gorchow, Kathy Gray, and Bill Ballinger. Sit in with us as we get the inside out off the record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by a grant from Truscott Rossman, Michigan's only bipartisan strategic communications firm serving statewide, national, and international clients from their offices in Lansing, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. TruscottRossman.com. Hager Fox Heating and Air Conditioning Company, serving the greater Lansing area since 1941, providing solutions and choices for home comfort during all Michigan seasons. Hager Fox and Bryant, whatever it takes. HagerFox.com. And by MSU College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, tackling the world's biggest problems related to food, energy, and the environment. With 20 majors, 17 minors, and 12 certificate programs, the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources provides students the opportunity to excel. And now, this edition of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.
Thank you very much. Welcome to this edition of Off the Record. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, what kind of reviews did the governor's budget get?
It's pretty good. I'd give it probably a 7. I think it's 7 people were, based on what people were saying.
Yeah, I'd give it a 7 or an 8, yeah.
8.
Democrats gave it a 9. Republicans gave it a 5. You know what I'm saying? Let's take a look at the budget. Students in well-to-do schools will get an extra $50 per pupil, and poorer districts will get $100 per pupil. The governor also wants an additional $778 per pupil in so-called at-risk high schools.
These children, through no fault of their own, who have challenges that are rather difficult, if we can make the right investments, get them into the classroom and help them with whatever the challenges they may have, academic or otherwise, that's well worth it.
Having spent almost $250 million on the Flint water crisis to date, the governor wants an additional $50 million. But this Flint Democrat is worried that some of her colleagues, they may be suffering from Flint fatigue.
I know there's a fatigue with Flint, so you have to keep fighting that fight, and you have to keep reminding people what it's like to haul water and what it's like to make sure all the water's in the house so it doesn't freeze, and making sure your kids aren't drinking out of the hose. So, we'll see. We'll continue to fight the fight. We'll keep an eye on it. But overall, it's not too bad at this point.
The governor also wants to hire 100 additional state troopers, bringing the force up to 2,000 officers. The governor did not endorse any income tax rollback, but he tells Republicans who want to do that, he'll talk about it.
It will be a part of this conversation. I don't know where it'll end up, but it'll be definitely part of the conversation. And I've always been open to talking about tax relief.
The governor warns those Republicans if they want to roll back the taxes, they'll need to cut the budget in other places to make up the lost revenue. All right, so Zachary, what was your lead on the budget?
Well, 2 things. The fight on tax cuts being set up, and then also this sort of unexpected battle between the governor and the charter school lobby on some key education funding items.
He stole some money from the cyber schools.
Yes.
How dare him?
Right. 20% reduction in their per pupil grant. Currently, they get the same foundation grant as other students per pupil amount. And there's critics out there who say, hey, wait a minute, you don't have janitorial costs, heating and cooling, electrical. Why do you need the same amount of money as regular charter schools and traditional public schools?
Kathy, what did you write?
Well, he also put $50 more for high schools, and that didn't make the charter school people happy either, because many of them are just elementary schools, so they lose out on that too. But our lead also was the fight over income tax. The Republicans really want to cut in the income tax, and Snyder does not.
Let me take exception to the word fight. We don't have a fight yet. He said, I'm willing to talk to you. Okay, they're going to sit down, and at the end of the day, they're going to come up with something. So I think you both got that wrong. Bill?
Well,
Sorry.
Despite what Zach and Kathy say, I think the headline would be, the price of fiscal stability is boredom. This is one of the most boring budgets and least controversial I've seen. Despite what they said, and this is valid, I just don't think there's much there that gets people's juices really flowing compared to a lot of budget situations we found in the past.
Well, no, there's no, 10% cut for this or 8% increase for that. That's going to bring in the armies of lobbyists from around the state to fight on this. But I can't ever recall a governor preempting his own party and sort of, in Snyder's own relaxed way, wagging his finger in their face saying, don't you think about cutting taxes. I mean, those weren't his words, but you had him, the lieutenant governor, come in there and lay out a detailed case of all the tax relief and fee relief that's coming online, things that have already happened. I can't ever remember seeing that before.
Well, I was reflecting on the lead on the budget years ago used to be bazillions cut from the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked Mr. Pasholka, the budget director, are there any cuts in here? Oh, yeah, there's a couple. I mean, that story's completely gone. So I guess that's a plus. But the D's love this budget. This was this looked almost like a Jennifer Granholm, Jim Blanchard budget.
They really did. With the increases in K-12
Why are you
education.
laughing, Ballinger?
Well, no wonder the Republicans only get a 5.
Well, exactly. That's my point. You figured that out, didn't you? I'm sorry, Kathy.
The increases in education, they love.
Off
They
the top.
absolutely
I mean,
love.
it's just incredible.
There are some things that they're not too happy about. The $260 million that he's putting into the rainy day fund. I think that some Democrats would like to see that put in other places. There's not much there for cities and the locals, and they'd like to see some more money going to them.
But he punted again on infrastructure. We kept waiting, Governor.
Yeah.
What fees are you going to do? Now he's got another group which is going to look at the recommendations from the first group. What's going on there?
Well, I think he realizes how tough it was to get the legislature to approve any kind of tax increases on the last road infrastructure fix we had a year and a half ago. They finally got something together. They could add on to it. Look, I think what's most interesting is some of the personalities involved. You've got Al Pasholka, who is now the budget director for Snyder, who was the head of the Appropriations Committee, and you could say his protege, or one of them, Laura Cox, is now the chair. And I noticed, by the way, she was not that enthusiastic about the budget. She took a swipe at the governor about, I'm disappointed to see no tax cut in here. And
She didn't have to say that.
even though, she is a very appealing, charismatic figure, she's very conservative, her voting record. And here you have the chair of the committee, and she's set up to go mano a mano with her old boss, Pasholka, who's now the budget director. So I think the whole thing is kind of interesting.
Pasholka said to one Democrat, you guys are going to like this. My guys, well, I'm not so sure.
You can almost see the Democrats struggling to come up with criticism in their official statements. And, how many chances did they get a year? I think one, to ask the governor questions face to face. And they lobbed up a couple of softballs at him. I mean,
Give him the one on state police. What did he ask?
There was a question on, do you think adding more state police troopers will make our communities safer? And then there was another question asking him to talk about the added funding for at-risk students. I mean, they could have drilled him on the unemployment stuff, Flint, they gave him a pass.
The UIA, they apparently are going to hold these people harmless.
Well, that's certainly what the committee members were saying, and there is a fund there that they're hoping will be used to make people whole, but Democrats are still going to be making sure that happens.
Let me just give you the backstory on it. These are the people that were wrongly accused of fraudulent claims for jobless benefits, were fined by the state a bunch of money, and now Pasholka and the governor both confirmed there's money there, we'll give it back. He was asked, however, about damages. The governor wouldn't go there because he says it's part of a lawsuit. Jack Brandenburg says take part of that rainy day fund and give it back to the people. So maybe we will have a fight over this. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, look, the House Republicans, you've got the House Speaker has given his blessing to a bill to cut and eventually repeal the income tax. Now, I don't believe that will ever actually get to the governor's desk because the governor's drawn such a firm line in the sand. But there's a commitment in the House Republican caucus to cut taxes in some way. What form that is, how much it is, I don't know. Senator Meekoff, the majority leader in the Senate, has been a little bit iffy on whether he's going to back a big tax cut like some of his members are calling for. Senate position's a little bit muddled right now.
Let's talk about Brian Banks, now a former state representative. What happened to him?
Well, he decided to take a plea deal. He was charged with filing false documents when he applied for a loan back in 2010 and got charged with 4 felonies. And he's got other felonies on his record. So he could have been charged, well, he was charged with being an habitual offender, which would have put him in prison for a long time.
More than a year.
Yeah. So he
Right.
decided to take a plea deal, plead to a misdemeanor. That I think it has a maximum penalty of up to a year in jail.
Which means he'll do maybe about 3 months.
He's doing 0.
Yeah.
You'll do 0?
Zero.
Okay. Are you the parole officer on this case?
He spent 1 day in jail, and I believe the judge has signaled it'll be time served. He hasn't formally been sentenced yet, but it looks like he won't spend any time.
What did you
behind
make of
bars.
this?
This is a time-honored dance. Frank Kelly did this many times. Joe Mack back in the 1970s.
Arthur Cartwright.
Yeah, plea deals, legislators resign. I think people were kind of surprised at Brian Banks because he had a trail of felony convictions that he had overcome over the years and won re-election, and all of a sudden this comes in at the last moment. It was about ready to expire. I think this was the last day that the Attorney General could have brought the charge, and now he's out. One thing, just remember this, it now means you only need 55 votes to pass a bill until you fill that seat, because 109 members, a majority is now 55 rather than 56.
He tried to argue that this was an incredibly politically motivated charge. It was a $3,000 loan that he was late on paying back. It did eventually get paid back. So it was, a lot of people were saying, what are they charging this guy for this with? But he resigned his seat, and then a day and a half later, he sent out a fundraising email.
He's getting ready for his next race. He could run for city council
That would be
this
defined
fall.
as chutzpah.
Yeah.
He's made it clear we haven't seen the last of him. There's a Senate seat that'll be open, state Senate seat that'll be open in 2 years, and a lot of people say he is the hands-down favorite if he runs.
He could win.
I think he's the favorite to win.
Dick Posthumus emerges as Chief of Staff. This will be the last Chief of Staff that Governor Snyder will have. Posthumus will stay with him for the rest of the time, don't you think?
You would think so, certainly.
Yeah.
And it gives perhaps the governor a chance to develop a relationship with the Trump administration, because Jared Agin is Chief of Staff before Posthumus went down to join Mike Pence, the Vice President. That's why this position opened up again.
And quickly, just off the Justin Amash with a 1-sentence bill to eliminate Betsy DeVos's job. What did he do to offend the DeVosses? Will you please, somebody clue me in on this?
They don't like.
Does that go back a ways?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
They were tight for a while. I mean, I think that the DeVosses were big supporters of Justin Amash's when he
So
first
where
ran
did they
for
go
Congress.
sideways? Do we know?
Well, there have been some votes that Justin Amash has cast that I think have disappointed them. Now, they have not declared war on him publicly.
Well, he just declared war on her.
Well, it appears that way, yes.
Well, maybe he's trying to do her a favor.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, and he has always spoken his mind without fear of retribution, and he's been taken on Trump. So
Let's not lose sight of the fact that people for years have wanted to eliminate this department, have they not?
Exactly, yeah.
If Governor Perry had been able to remember it, it would have been part of that debate.
Right.
All right, let's call in our guest today. Vickie, come on in. Vickie Thompson Sandy is the first female president of Michigan's Lutheran Social Services. Her organization is bringing immigrants to Michigan, almost 1,600 last year. She holds a BA degree from Western Michigan and a master's degree from Eastern Michigan.
Thank you.
Kathy's got the first question.
Hi.
Hi.
So the travel ban that the executive order that President Trump put in is on hold now. Do you think that that's going to have any impact on bringing refugees into the state?
I think that we'll see some arrivals of refugees when the lower court put the injunction. We started seeing some of the flights that had been rescheduled or banned. We had started to see those arrivals starting to come and trickle in. So I think we'll begin to see more arrivals.
And how many people are kind of in limbo at this point as a result of everything that's happened?
We resettle typically about 1,400 to 1,500 refugees annually. And so on the day that the travel ban was first initiated in January, we had 22 people expected to arrive that day who were turned away. Those are the people who are now starting to arrive.
So with the court rulings that are now in place, are you seeing signs that the federal government is allowing these folks to come in, or does it still look like they're being slow-walked or there's a de facto prohibition still in place?
Yeah, I think that President Trump sent out a clear message, right, yesterday after the court's decision that I don't think that his intention is to change his direction. So I do believe that we will see a less number of refugees arriving this year based on
Was this a political decision from the court?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Well,
Samaritas.
that's what he said. He said it was.
Samaritas is really, our mission is to serve people. Our mission is not about being a political organization, and so we are here to serve refugees. We think it's the right thing to do.
How can you not be a political organization dealing with this issue?
We can advocate, right, certainly, and we advocate for the people that we serve. And so we believe that America is founded on immigrants and refugees. That's how we started. We think it's the right thing to do for people. If you look at who are we talking about, the people that we resettle predominantly are women, children, families who are fleeing their country because they're being persecuted. Their children are being taken, their young boys are being taken off to fight wars. They are behaving exactly like we would behave as mothers and fathers in protecting their children. It's hard to be political about that.
Well, do you get phone calls saying you shouldn't be doing this?
No, we do, of course.
Why did you say no first?
Because it's the minority. Really what happens is that we are flooded with people who are saying, what can we do to help? This seems a ridiculous position to take, especially when we're talking about people who are being persecuted and need a safe place. There is our largest humanitarian issue going on in Syria right now, right? There are 65 million refugees who are displaced out of their home country. 5 million of them almost are from Syria, and the most of them are women and children. People say America needs to step up and help them.
But what do the minorities say?
I think what we're hearing from President Trump, which is the fear of terrorists, the fear that someone will come and take a job that is rightfully theirs. I think if you look at the data, that's not actually what happens. Refugees arrive in a country, in a community, and we have so many days as an organization to help them become self-sufficient, and the majority become self-sufficient and they become employed. They open businesses, they employ native-born folks. They help the economy. I believe that's exactly why Governor Snyder opened the Michigan Office of New Americans, because it is about economic growth and redevelopment.
Ms. Sandy, when you say 1,500 people you expected maybe in this fiscal year to come, what percentage of those would have been from Syria, or how would the group have broken down ethnically that we're talking about? What countries?
Yeah, we believe the majority of those would have been Syrian refugees, but that's not the only group that we serve and resettle. We have folks from African countries like Ethiopia, Somalia. But if you look at the numbers globally, it is really Syria and Afghanistan where the largest number of refugees are being resettled from.
In past years, like after the Vietnam War, you had other ethnic groups that
That's right.
came to the fore, like the Hmong people from Laos and
That's
so
right.
forth.
And several years ago with the Burmese
Right.
crisis in Myanmar, we saw a lot of Burmese refugees. And so it really, our work really follows what's happening globally.
Well, even before the Trump order now, did you have a feeling as a group that maybe we should open our borders even more than was the case at the time when President Obama, for instance, was president? Maybe it was still tough to get refugees in to the extent that you would have liked them to come.
Yeah, if you look at the numbers, with 65 million people who are displaced from their home country, about 22 million of them are refugees. We only allow less than 100,000 people into the country. So of course, in our work of resettling refugees, that's a very small number. The United States takes only about 12% of refugees who are given permission to resettle into a third country.
How do you screen these folks?
So all the screenings are done at the federal level. So a refugee actually endures more screening than any other immigrant group that's allowed to come to the United States. They're screened by the United Nations, but then for a refugee who's allowed to come into the United States, they have 6 additional screenings that are done by federal intelligence agencies. Biometric screens, physical screens, multiple interviews. And so those screenings are done before they're allowed to travel here. If there's any question during any of those screenings, they are denied entry. That screening process, on average, takes about 24 months to complete.
But some say the interviews are like about 10 minutes. They aren't very extensive.
I would say that if you spoke to a refugee, and I just heard one, I think she was from Arkansas, who was just on the news yesterday, was talking about the fact that those interviews lasted up to 3 hours, some of them.
So the idea from critics that somehow the United States has really no idea what the background of these refugees are, and that dangerous people could easily evade detection through the vetting process. Is that true or not?
I think that's a false claim.
And why not?
There has been no documented case in the United States of a refugee who has carried out a terrorist attack. That screening process is so thorough. And of course, I think for the average person who doesn't work in refugee resettlement, who doesn't necessarily know a refugee, to talk about that process, I don't think they would certainly understand. I think that's logical. They would not understand the process of a refugee arriving. The average length of time that a refugee lives in a refugee camp until they're allowed to resettle into a third country is about 10 years. There is a lot known about refugees before they're allowed to enter our country.
What about criminal activity other than terrorism? Have there been any bad experiences here in Michigan with refugees in terms of criminal activity over the years that you know of?
Not that I know of, no.
Would you know?
You know, we certainly would know when it came to our clients that we serve. We certainly would know that.
Are your clients in a high state of anxiety right now?
Yes, they have family members. What happens in that process is that not everybody in the family gets approval to be resettled at the same time. And so families come to join other family members, and they leave family members behind who are still going through that robust screening process. And so I think the anxiety is about how much longer, or will my family ever be reunited with me?
Are you hearing from the refugees that you work with that their experience here in the States has changed since the election? What are they telling you about their treatment in the community?
Yeah, I have heard through some of our staff that that the bullying in school for our children has increased, that we've had some cases where we've had to support the children. So I think there is an increased anxiety and an increased response from some people. I have to tell you, honestly, that is really the minority. The majority of what we have heard from the community and from refugees about interactions is really the overwhelming response from the community who says, this is not the right thing to do, and what can we do to support refugees?
What do you do when they need help if they've been bullied?
You know, a refugee resettlement organization has multiple programs. It's not just about resettlement, but it's about wraparound services to support the integration of refugees into community. So we have a school impact program where we help children who are entering the schools. We are liaisons with the schools who are impacted by multicultural issues coming to the school, language issues. And so our school impact staff would be helping those children, working with the school as a liaison to say, what can we do?
About 15 months ago, Governor Snyder decided to, as he put it, pause his administration's efforts to try to bring more refugees to the state. Did that have any impact at all on refugee resettlement in the state?
It did for that moment, that we saw decreased numbers, and I think that he was not the only governor, right, who made that statement. So, and this is a federal program, and so there was a pause for a while. But last year we resettled about 1,500 refugees, and so that did not last for the duration of
Your
that year.
group is Samaritas. How many other groups like yours are there in Michigan who are bringing in refugees?
Sure, there's a couple other organizations, a Catholic organization here in Lansing, Bethany Christian Services in Grand Rapids, and then there are multiple organizations, Access out of Dearborn, multiple agencies in Michigan who provide support services.
In a normal year, how many come in altogether, would you say, refugees, to all these groups, or through these groups, to Michigan?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's probably 2,000 or so.
2,000.
So you have the bulk of
You
those.
got like
You're
three
the
quarters.
biggest. In fact, you're the fourth largest in the nation, are
That's
you not?
right. That's right.
Thank you, Madam President, for joining us. Also, our thanks
Thank
to you
you.
guys. See you next week on Off the Record.
Production of Off the Record is made possible in part by a grant from Truscott Rossman, Michigan's only bipartisan strategic communications firm serving statewide, national, and international clients from their offices in Lansing, Detroit, and Grand Rapids. TruscottRossman.com. Hager Fox Heating and Air Conditioning Company, serving the greater Lansing area since 1941, providing solutions and choices for home comfort during all Michigan seasons. Hager Fox and Bryant, whatever it takes. HagerFox.com. And by MSU College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, tackling the world's biggest problems related to food, energy, and the environment. With 20 majors, 17 minors, and 12 certificate programs, the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources provides students the opportunity to excel. For more Off the Record, visit WKAR.org. Michigan public television stations have contributed to the production costs of Off the Record with Tim Skubick.